Welcome to the Money Healing Club podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Duncan. I'm a financial therapist and art therapist, and you've come to the softest place to land in personal finance. This podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. For help with your particular situation, please seek help from a licensed professional in mental health, taxes, and finance. Here we talk about all the things we don't usually say when we talk about money. Let's begin. Y'all, I loved this episode, and it's a pretty in-depth one. This is where we get to have a great conversation with River Nice, who's a queer, anti-capitalist financial educator. We're also joined by Angie Fitzpatrick, the community program manager of the Money Healing Club, and you have heard our conversations about gender and money in previous episodes. We cover so much here. We talk about key financial topics for the queer community, the importance of estate planning for everyone with a body, navigating the complexities of investing, how we've been convinced to have personal responsibility for systemic issues, and the crucial and often overlooked element of community care, the ability to ask, and the ability to give, and what that really means. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did, and details about how to follow River's work are included in the show notes.
So yeah, my name is River Nice. My pronouns are they, them. I call myself an anti-capitalist financial planner, if such a thing is possible. Although these days I'm much more leaning into financial education through an anti-capitalist lens than one-on-one financial planning.
I think it's possible because you're doing it. So it is. That's
Thanks.
what it is. You're doing it. I think we're both creating things that haven't existed in the world, and there's, an evolving process of naming what we're doing. Yeah, and I think both of us coming from this place of, education and saying some things that need to be said about money. So I would like to kick off with, what are some of the top topics that you feel like needs to be discussed about money? Like, just in general, what do you find you spend the most time educating people on?
Oh, great question. So for my audience, which tends to be queer people in their 20s and 30s, uh, straight up budgeting is a big topic. And I think that's mostly because the word budget has been used to mean kind of like diet.
Yeah.
And I don't want to just fuel diet culture that does so much harm to so many people. I want budget to mean directing the flow of money to what's important to you. So that's a huge topic and helping people, through the shame and guilt about that.
Mhm.
Um, Another huge topic is like family stuff, family planning, family creation, naming chosen family, particularly for queer community.
Mhm.
So it's not inexpensive for a lot of us in the queer community to
Yeah.
have kids. And that's a big topic is not just like how do we afford having kids, but how do we set up our financial and legal lives to reflect our chosen families who we want
Mhm.
to be sharing resources with.
Mhm.
Another huge one is, of course, gender transition for those of us that need social, legal, medical transition. That's also not inexpensive most of the time.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then folks always want to know the basics like how do I buy a house, including like how can I buy a house with a group of friends or with a whole polycule?
Mhm.
Um, and like, literally what is the stock market and how do I have a harm reduction approach to the stock market? Um,
Yep.
Stuff like that. And then it's important to me to also talk about things like insurance, not just health insurance, but like life insurance, disability insurance. But folks I don't know, that's like the least interesting one.
Right. The boring but important stuff that we know
Exactly.
from the other side, like, oh, it's so important, but I get that it ends up being low priority. Yeah. But okay, so you wrap the insurance stuff in there too. Also, I'm wondering about kind of like end of life, like estate planning and things like that. I'm sure that comes up in your work too.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I have in mind when I say like naming who family is to
Gotcha.
me or to us, right? Like the estate plan is such a hugely important tool
Yeah.
to literally tell the state this is who family is and this is who is not. Here's who can have decision making in my life and in my family, and here's who can't.
Right. Right. Because we're not just talking about a will, we're talking about power of attorney, medical power of attorney, all of these things. I only recently got my estate planning documents done with our family. And I was surprised how relieving it was, actually. It was this thing that was like, it's so stupid. It's so boring. And then we did it. I'm like, wow, it really like brought up some conversations. How would we set things up for our children? My husband and I have very different opinions about like the assistance we need on our last days. I'm like, wow, that was an important conversation to have. So I think you had a really good video just recently about like, if you are a human with a body who's over 18, was it you need estate documents? Am I
Yeah,
right?
absolutely, absolutely. And I think the misconception there is because the part of the estate plan that we're most familiar with from TV is the will, that a lot of us, especially younger folks, are like, what do I have? A bunch of debt? Like, I don't need to like leave
Yeah.
anything in my will. But folks don't realize it is that like, who is my power of attorney? Who is my medical power of attorney? What's in my living will? Because me, as a person who takes testosterone every week, I wrote into my living will, if I'm in a coma, continue to administer testosterone to me, no
Right.
matter who the president is. Like,
Right.
and that's the important stuff. I care way less about who inherits this desk or this computer than I do about who has decision making authority and what those decisions need to be.
Yeah, I mean, like, estate planning is not for rich people. Like, and I think there is that misconception. And I know you've shared, like, some really accessible ways to get estate planning done. Actually, would you mind just sharing some of that? I'd be
Yeah, of
curious.
course. Freewill.com is awesome. I love that they got the URL freewill.com. That's hilarious.
That is
Um,
amazing. Yeah.
but it's a great place to start. So for somebody whose situation is simple enough, like, you don't own multiple businesses, you don't own property in multiple states,
Mhm.
you're not worried about anyone contesting who should be the guardian of your children if something happens to you. Like, so without those complexities, freewill.com is probably sufficient to just like get it all done and then just make sure once you write it to take it to the notary and get it,
Mhm.
legally authorized or whatever, notarized, I guess. um, but even for anybody whose situation is more complex and they should be working with an estate planning attorney, I think it'll still save you time and therefore money with the attorney who bills usually in 15-minute increments. If you go through the process on freewill.com with your people first and then
Mhm.
take those answers to the attorney and be like, how do we make sure that XYZ
Yeah,
doesn't cause a problem?
that makes so much
So
sense. Yeah, cheaper to edit than create.
and big disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a just a financial educator doing my best. But that's what I've learned from my experiences and speaking to lawyers in my life.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. And just directing folks, like, do a little prep work, have some of these decisions made, yeah, before going to the lawyer or whatever it is. I love that. I haven't looked at that, and I will definitely share that with the club.
I was just saying the other day, even things like bank accounts, right? Like, if something were to happen to my partner, how would I get into their bank account? We've been putting money in there together. So there's so many little pieces that we have to think about.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that right, that brings up like how are my passwords saved? Does my partner even know where all of the things are, where things live, Like especially like when I have clients that have like a bunch of student loans and maybe some private student loans, like their partner might be aware that there are student loans, but do you know which website to go to, let alone what
Yeah.
password is to get in there? So organizing all that stuff is absolutely part of it. There's another resource. There's this like book you can buy that's called "I'm Dead Now What,"
Oh, I've heard of this.
and it's like a little planner that you can fill out with a little bit of levity, which I appreciate. Um, so you can kind of organize all that stuff. And then as long as your people know where that book is,
Mhm.
they can get the info if they need to. But that just feels like such a kindness to me. If my loved ones have to deal with the tragedy of like me being in a coma or me being gone, I would love to remove any
Mm.
salt from that wound
Yeah.
so they can just grieve without having to spend tons of time and energy on the logistics of it all.
Yeah, that sounds like a great Father's Day gift, really. Because, I mean, a lot of us have aging parents, and wow, I don't know, these boomers don't tend to be very honest about their death or have included their adult children in, like, what their deal is, so that's another of my little side quests is helping a lot of my clients, similar age as yours, maybe forge this conversation with their parents, because it's like, okay, if I'm gonna be the one dealing with your estate or whatever, like, I just need to know some of the basics, where to go, what kind of insurances do you have, and It doesn't mean like, airing out the underwear drawer. It's just like, I just need to know some places to go. I had a client whose parent, died suddenly, and there was a safe in the basement and no one knew how to get in there or what was in there. What a
Yikes.
nightmare. Like not helpful.
No. And it's tough to bring up the conversation because especially, I can't speak for all boomers, but some that I know have don't have the emotional skills to be able to feel how terrifying it is to have a mortality kind of conversation and then still be able to proceed with that conversation.
Yeah.
So for those of us that are trying to talk to those older folks, I think we need to find the creative ways to like bring a little levity or make it not as directly about you're going to die or I want to inherit or,
Right. That's
uh,
not it. Yeah.
it's not it, but it is just help me help you.
Help
Uh,
me help you.
let's be a team here and make sure that we can handle whatever life throws at us.
Totally. River, how do you guide folks or help them with the conversation of, okay, I know I need to have more money. I know that investing is a crucial part of that. But I am really worried about what I don't want to be supporting things that I'm not behind, especially when investing in stocks feel super mysterious. And investing is not, something that I'm trained in. And I really kind of like direct people to other investing professionals with those questions. How do you guide that conversation? Because I think we have a similar audience that like really want to do the right thing with their money, but are also really scared that like, have I missed out on investing and growing my wealth?
Yeah. I always got to start with acknowledging how harmful the stock market is to everyone and the whole planet. Like,
Mm.
it's something that only exists under capitalism. Like, no other economic or social model would have something like this. It kind of is like, um, just a microcosm of capitalism. But and what I mean by that is like the stock market, what it is these companies are allowing people who have enough money, enough capital to buy into ownership of those companies, right? That's what buying a share of stock is. You are buying a tiny slice of ownership of some company. And then with the goal of, because I have bought into ownership of this company, that I have contributed nothing to making this company run better or be more useful to the world. I just bought in. Now the goal is for me to make money from that. So these like very wealthy like owners and CEOs, like the billionaires, like they are setting themselves up to, because they own the majority of a company or some giant share of a company, and they make the ownership of that company seem valuable via the stock market. Um, that is like inflating how much wealth the people who are already starting with money can get. And it's all imaginary, right? Like a share of stock is not something you can eat. It can't shelter your children. It can't provide you health care. It's just this baseball card
Yeah.
that we've decided is worth money. And meanwhile, the employees of these companies often are not being paid enough to live or to retire or to get health care.
Right.
So the employees are the ones that are actually making the companies run, actually creating value in the form of the goods and services that the companies provide. But
Right.
it is only the people that are able to buy in with money they already have into ownership that then can receive
Right.
extra profit from those companies.
Right. And the value of the company increases the less they pay their workers.
Exactly.
So, like, if you're invested in something like Amazon, Walmart, all of these like big notorious ones, as a shareholder, you make money or you increase your profits. The more they decrease their expenses and keeping that margin as high as possible.
So hold on. So I remember seeing last year tons of memes about like so and so has record profits, but why does gas cost this much or why does this cost this much? So what you're telling me now is that like those record profits, not only is it, that they're exploiting their workers, but this is also how they're attracting more investors, more like stock. Okay, it's all coming together. Yeah.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. I mean, it's the fiction that we all have to believe for this to work. And work, I put in, air quotes.
Right. Because it doesn't actually. And then when the stock market crashes, the government has to bail it out using the taxpayer money.
Oh,
It's a mess. So when we're starting from that place of the stock market is inherently evil, That's why I use the phrase harm reduction when I'm talking about it, because
Yeah.
as much as I would love to not touch any of that with a 10-foot pole and like entirely invest my time and energy and money into stuff that actually makes things livable for most of us, I also will be older and less able in the future,
Yeah.
hopefully, right? Like, I hope that I continue to live long and will be less able to work for my income later in life. And, or like, I don't know how much healthcare is going to cost. I don't know how much like housing is going to cost 30 years from now. So when I think about preparing for retirement, which to me is the main reason to care about investing, like obviously, yes, people will use investing as a tool to save up for stuff that's sooner, shorter term than retirement. And obviously, people are in different ages, different stages of closeness to retirement. But um, for me, I'm much more interested in, okay, if I have to engage with the stock market, it's going to be so that I have more money available when I am older,
Yeah.
even if it's not enough to do a full, like I call it the American dream retirement.
Yeah.
Because that's not accessible to the majority of Americans. Most of us are not going to be able to save or invest enough to have the $1 million to $5 million needed to do a conventional American dream, quote unquote, retirement. And it's always been the case that a lot of Americans have not been able to afford it, particularly the folks that have been dealing with the harms of white supremacy on them, and all of the theft that we have done to Black and Indigenous communities specifically. So when I think about, okay, but I do need to put some money into the stock market in order to have some money later in life, whether that means that I get to stop working entirely or whether it means that I can work only part-time or whether it means that that's the money that's available for a retirement home specifically, like whatever that looks like for me, then I want to be putting my money into things like mutual funds and ETFs that are doing less harm than others. So a really great free tool is prisonfreefunds.org.
Okay. I'm going to put all this in the show notes, y'all. Prison
Prison
free funds
.org.
.org. Okay.
Mhm. So if you
Cool.
go to prisonfreefunds.org, you can search almost any mutual fund or ETF in their little database, and they give you a scorecard A through F. Does this fund include companies that are literally private prisons, private border control facilities, that are literally fossil fuel companies, that are literally doing deforestation, that are civilian firearms manufacture and sales, or military weapons manufacture and sales, or tobacco manufacture and sales?
Mhm.
They also do a scorecard for gender equality, but I don't really trust that type of measurement because if you put a cisgender white woman in charge of the company that's doing fracking, like they're still doing fracking. How is that doing gender
Right.
equality for the world?
Right.
Who's measuring that? How is it measurable? I
Right.
don't
There's
know.
so many intersections. It makes me think of we had a certified financial planner talk in the club, and we were talking about like ESG funds. Remember Angie when Josh was
Yes, I
talking about
do.
that? And he said that like they have come a long way, but like they're looking at one aspect, right? Okay, we got the environmental part, blah blah blah. But like you might not know all the other things. So it's a little tricky. Like you said, we're talking about harm reduction and maybe they're doing some good environmental stuff, but like the social stuff they're not working on. And it is so you have to determine your tolerance. Like, is that how you
Yeah.
think of it?
Right. So I think about like what data points are measurable and useful, and then which data points are most important to me, which is a terrible question to have to ask. Do I care more about the prison industrial complex and trying to do less harm there? Or do I care more about like the climate changing? Like, how am I
Right.
supposed to answer that question? But again, just thinking about what data is measurable as opposed to like gender equality or racial equality or whatever. Because we can't have those things under capitalism anyway. But what is measurable, what is useful, what is most important to me, and knowing that I'm not going to be able to be perfect, and knowing that if I only have $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, that's a fraction of a drop in the bucket of how much money is total in the stock market,
Yeah.
right? So instead of feeling like I need to be pure and my money needs to be not funding anything that I disagree with, that's not possible. So instead, it's just like, okay, proportional to how much impact I have as an individual, as a family, as a community with X number of dollars, I'm going to put a reasonable amount of effort into trying to reduce the harm that I am participating in. But knowing that already the stock market is inherently evil and bad for the world, and
Yes.
there's no way to not touch anything that is bad.
And this is a guess, I don't really know this, River, but like, okay, like when we talk about ESG funds, which stands for environmental social governance,
Yep.
is that the G? Yeah.
Yep.
That they are growing and changing, maybe improving, it's a relatively new concept. The more interest there is in these funds, the more they will make them. So like, even if, you feel like, oh, does my money make a difference? But the more we're saying to capitalism, if we're going to do this, we want it to be this way, it will move the needle. Like these funds will get better. Hopefully more options will come up as time goes on, right?
That's the hope.
That's the hope. That's the collective stuff. Yeah.
Exactly. It's a systemic issue. And so we do what we can as individuals, like you said, River, to like mitigate the harm that we're doing. But we also have to, we have to balance that. Like, what are the needs of myself, my family? And there's so many other ways too that we can push back on systems. So I give myself grace sometimes. There's a Walmart down the road. They're all bad. Like I cannot spend an hour going to the other side of town to buy a small thing. So I will get this thing here today and treat the workers at this store kindly. And that's what I'm doing today. Yeah.
I mean, they have the lowest prices and stuff. So it's like, if we're looking at our personal economy and that is something you need to do for your and your family's survival, I get it.
I just could go on about this forever, but like, um, it also frustrates me that we have such a narrative around like, well, like vote with your dollars or like don't spend money at places that are harmful because that puts the onus on us as the individuals who don't make enough money and have too many expenses and have too much debt instead of the billionaires that have hoarded all of the money in the world in their little kind of fake gold piles instead of feeling like, well, I shouldn't have an Amazon Prime subscription or that makes me bad. It's like, well, Amazon shouldn't be allowed to do what it's doing. It's so
Yes.
ubiquitous. We should have government regulating how those companies function. Capitalism would only work if, I shouldn't say that, capitalism would never work, but the way it's supposed to work is you're not supposed to allow monopolies. And there's supposed to be healthy competition between companies. Amazon got the way that it got because it underpriced books so that it drove all of the independent booksellers out of business. And then it had a monopoly on that business. And then it just expanded to more and more aspects of life. And then it expanded to buying most of the servers that the internet runs on. Like Amazon owns most of the internet. So this is not, I'm causing a problem because I pay $100 a year for an Amazon Prime subscription or because I order stuff or whatever. I will try to reduce the harm of like, I don't ask for the 1-day shipping. I'm like, no, like take your time. These workers, these delivery people are being given ridiculous quotas. So I do the tiny little bits that I can. And I do try to support the small local businesses when I can, because I don't want them to continue to go out of business until Amazon is the only option. But it's not on us to not shop at Amazon or Walmart. It's on the people in power to stop making this impossible for us.
Reach. Yeah, absolutely.
It makes me think of recycling.
Yes.
And how recycling has been the corporate way of passing the buck onto consumers, that it's up to us now to recycle. And that if like the landfills and the oceans are filled with junk, it is our individual responsibility. It has been such a masterful sleight of hand, and greenwashing in general, right? Like apparently the term carbon footprint, I believe, was coined by Exxon. Is that right?
I was literally going to bring
BP.
this up.
Yeah.
I think it was BP. It was
Yeah.
all of
One of them.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm sure they were all working together. But yeah, how evil for those oil companies to be like, what's the problem is your carbon footprint. Don't look at ours. What is that?
So I think we need to look at this. It's like, I was talking about this last night. We had a talk on debt in the club. It's like, okay, there's so much systemic stuff, right, about debt. But then the tools to deal with it are completely individual and you're on your own. And if you're in debt, it's your fault. But it's like we've been on this playground slide with no friction to slide into it, but it's our fault we're sliding down the slide.
Yep.
There's just so many slices where this happens. And hey, you're a person who listens to the news, who had an education. We want to do the right thing. We want to take that individual responsibility. And it's so hard. It's so hard to feel both like, yes, I have some agency, I have some power. And like, this is not all on me. Like, this cannot be all on me. This is a systemic governmental policy issue. And
Exactly. And to bring that back to retirement really quick, when I teach planning for retirement to my program, like we obviously have to talk about everything we just did with like quote unquote ethical investing or ESG investing and like the stock market and 401ks and all that. But then we spend half the time, okay, how are we creatively and collectively preparing to be older, preparing to be sicker, preparing for things to continue to get more expensive? So part of retirement planning is also like having conversations with your loved ones, with people that are the same age as you, older than you, younger than you, about like, what can we set up? Are you good at mending clothes? Can you learn to grow food? Can we give each other rides? Can we share a car? Like, how can we set up stable housing that's pretty like relatively affordable, whether we can actually buy a house or if we could develop a relationship with a landlord who's a human being and cares about my humanity and quality of life? Like, there are lots of creative ways to be planning for quote unquote retirement. That is more about how do we as humans collectively care for each other and not so much about these like conventional financial systems.
Wow, I love that. And could you share some examples, like, I don't know, whether your own life or some stories you can share about people really creatively and rebelliously building community care into their aging? I love this topic.
I love it so much. And I get inspired by my clients all the time. Like I feel like I have the best job in the world because I'm like, hey, what are we all doing about retirement? We can get creative about this. And then immediately like, oh yeah, I'll do this, I'll do that. So I mean, my partner is literally learning to sew and to crochet and to mend clothes so that we don't have to spend money on clothes and so we don't have to participate as much in fast fashion throughout the rest of our lives. What else? Here in Philly, we have an apartment building for older folks that are primarily LGBTQ. And so they have a resident driven newsletter that I signed up for so that I get to hear about like whose cancer treatment went well and who watched a good movie last night and whose recipe is ready to be shared with the world. And I love that. And they're doing more like community events. That's like, come hang out with us. And I'm like, I would love to come hang out with you. Like, how are you all doing, my elders? You know, like what can you teach me? What can I learn? What is it that you need as you are older than me so that I can prepare for that?
Yeah, and that was built intentionally, right? That was probably a core pod of people years ago that got that started, and now it is a place that exists for. I love that so much.
Cool.
I love it too. Another really cool one, I had a client who is disabled and requires care workers on like a daily basis to come to the home and be helpful for her disability needs. And she is in a situation that she's not able to save anything, right? Because this country makes it very, very hard for disabled people to have or keep money. So she was like, well, actually, my retirement strategy is right now I'm working on convincing the healthcare workers that help me to unionize. Because they're burning out too fast. So I need their work life to be better so they can provide better and more sustained care to me. So if I can support them in making the union happen and improving their work lives and their quality of life, that'll have an impact on my care for the rest of my life.
Everyone wins.
Everyone wins. And so she's like, look, I don't have a body or a brain that can do X, Y, or Z, but I can have these conversations and I can have the emotional support and I can like educate about what it would take to make a union. So that's my creative retirement planning. I thought that was one of the coolest ones.
Oh, that is so good. I know. I look around, I live in like the suburbs of Denver. I'm like looking at these houses. And it's like, why do we each own a lawnmower? Why do we each own a blender? Right. And we have at the Denver Tool Library, which is private, and as well as our regular libraries have like tools and stuff. Yeah, there's a sewing machine at our local library. So I've gone and like mended stuff there. So I don't have to deal with like storing a sewing machine. Like this consumerism is so built on individualism, right? And anti-community care, right? It's like, no, each of us needs like 15 appliances or even more in our kitchen, something you use like once a year. And I just like, sometimes I look in our library like someone's garage should just be dedicated to be the tool library, right? Why aren't we doing that? Well, I don't know my neighbors well. Like, I'm so part of the system where like we each live our independent lives. I know I don't want to bother them or da da da. Yeah.
Capitalism keeps us that way. It's so hard to find space for that when you have to work 40 hours a week. Plus also, those of us who have kids are separated from the, extended kin or whoever would help us take care of our kids. So we're just all exhausted, and it's really hard to build quality community when everyone is tired.
I have a note, River, from our conversation last week. How to give. How can we think about giving? Because I've definitely worked with clients where I have very lovingly said, "You think you're donating too much." Like, I don't think you can afford the level of financial assistance you're giving, and I really get that it comes from the right place. But I'm worried for your future, right? This kind of conversation. How do you navigate the again? Why is this shifted to individuals to sponsor research and environmental causes and gender causes and all of that? Why is this on the individual? How do you help folks navigate like feeling good about their own philanthropy?
First, I want to pick the bone of the word philanthropy.
Yeah, sure.
There's this book called Decolonizing Wealth by Edgar Villanueva that really takes apart the concept of philanthropy and why that's harmful. He's talking about it more in like the giant industry of philanthropy, right? Of very wealthy people, quote unquote, donating all this money. And that's like makes them a good person. Like, like Bill Gates having the Gates Foundation instead of acknowledging the harm that just him being a billionaire is, stuff like that. So
take it to heaven. Yeah, I know.
Yep, exactly. So there's all of that. But even that relates to more of us everyday people. Like, I don't give out of some sense of like, well, I have more and you have less. And it is like, I am so, yeah, it is still kind of a ticket to heaven thing. Like, oh, well, I will be a good person if I just give you something that is like, there's something in there that's like, it's normal for me to have more and you to have less, or it's like, I don't know how to phrase exactly what I'm trying to say.
It feels like tithing.
Yeah.
Version of tithing where like, I'm okay because I helped in this way. So like, we're good. Like it's like this evening of the books.
Right.
But there are no books.
And I see it a lot, like what you're saying about like some of your clients give too much. I see it a lot with like 22-year-old white queer people who like have not just realized, but like are grappling with white supremacy is real and I benefit from it. It's like I went through that. I had to learn that white supremacy was real, that it existed, that I benefit from it, that my family has the money and stability we have, not just because like my dad worked hard, which he did, but also because he had so many more opportunities and he was paid more than like a woman of color would have been in his position, stuff like that. But then that white guilt of like, oh no, I am therefore bad because I benefit from this really awful system. I can fix it by just giving away everything and making myself more pure, more of a martyr, more of a suffering in order to atone for. And I'm not saying it's exclusive. It's certainly not exclusive to white people. It's certainly not exclusive to queer people or young people, but that mentality comes up a lot. And that's the group that I see it from the most out of my audience. So tied to that white guilt of like, well, I'm inherently bad. And I want to push back on that because I don't think that I or you or any of us are inherently bad people because we benefit from white supremacy. It's that acknowledgement of like, okay, this system exists. We do benefit from it. We do contribute to it in conscious and unconscious ways. How are we going to interact with that for the rest of our lives? And framing it that way, instead of how do I make myself pure enough today that I am allowed to continue to exist, let's frame it as what am I going to spend my life doing to helping to overthrow the most harmful systems and create a more equitable world, even if it's just my little corner of the world. Once we're coming from that place, we still need to share with others, right? Like I'm not like, don't give, whatever. But I want to come from more of the perspective of mutual aid. And that term is tough because I think the term then gets interpreted as still meaning charity or philanthropy or donating. But core mutual aid is that your survival and my survival are intertwined. And that's a hard concept for us to get when we've been like brainwashed by capitalism and white supremacy our whole lives. But like you were talking about with like, well, we should all just share these tools. I'm like, yeah, and we should all have public transportation instead of individual cars. We actually, as a species, evolved because we need each other, because we use each other. Nobody's a lone wolf. We got to where we are because we all got together and were hunting and gathering and farming and like raising the kids together. Like that's
Yeah.
how we evolved to where we are.
Yeah.
So I need you two to be participating in society in a way that is like good for you in order for there to be a society that I can also participate in. Because you're good at what you're good at, I'm good at what I'm good at, and together we can hopefully raise the kids and feed everybody and take care of the health needs. Um, so if I'm coming from that perspective, then yes, I want to be sharing resources, money, and other resources besides money.
Time, brains, and care, all of
The
that.
lawnmower, the car,
Yeah.
a credit score that's high so that I can co-sign for somebody whose credit score is low, a life insurance policy who's listed as the beneficiaries on that life insurance policy. Like we can get creative about lots of it, right? The power of attorney in the estate plan. Like we can be sharing lots of these tools, but I also want to make sure that I keep saying it as sharing because I don't want to just accidentally slip right into, well, I'm white and I come from upper middle class, so I need to just give and not ask for help. Because
Right.
if I'm not asking for help, I'm not vulnerably creating a connection with another human. I'm not building trust. I'm still coming from a place of the haves and the have-nots, and I will always be the have and you will always be the have-not, and this is a one-way street.
I love it. Yeah, it's like it enforces the division actually, right? And then this like money is this intermediary, like you said, like this purity stuff. And oh gosh, there's so much like religious stuff seeped into all of this.
So much. It all
Gross.
stems back to the Puritans.
Exactly. Oh, well, River, I need to send you my notes I just did on the history of debt, debtors, prisons, bankruptcy, all of that. Like this is all
Absolutely.
also very recent. That like it's been
Yes.
okay to borrow and not get your hand chopped off. Like it's very new. So the awkwardness we're facing and how much has changed with money in the last 150 years is like just massive.
Because the billionaires sucked all the money up. And so what does that leave us with?
Yeah. Yeah.
Less money, more
Yeah.
debt. To come back
Yeah.
to, you were asking how to help your clients decide how much to give. So it's like, that's the mindset around it, right? Let's get away from the haves and the have-nots and get away from putting yourself in either category and get into what is the sharing of money, sharing of other things besides money. But then pragmatically, I still want to decide how many dollars to put where in a month. So I look at the pie chart of where is all my money going this month and which slice should be the biggest and getting really honest with yourself. For me, shelter is the biggest slice because that's the most important thing for me to pay for is a roof over my head, a place to live, a place to work because I am lucky enough to work from home. So if I end up in a situation that the slice of sending money out, sharing money away from me is bigger than my shelter slice, and I'm not here to tell anybody what your priorities should be, right? But for me, that's out of whack with my priorities. That's
Yeah,
not
it feels
accurate.
unsafe. I mean, it's literally like, let's not get unsafe. Yeah.
So for me, again, as a white person that comes from an upper middle class background, like my sending money out slice, and particularly sending money out to Black and Indigenous communities, is bigger than my takeout slice or my travel
Yeah.
for fun slice, because that to me is more important than those conveniences.
Mhm.
But I've had clients that are like, my disabilities are such, or my work schedule is such, or my parenting is such that takeout has to be a bigger slice.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, what is more important than putting food in you and your family's bellies? I'm not here to judge how you do that, but getting that really honest with yourself about which of these slices should be bigger than others can help me arrive at a number of how much money am I sending out, at least during the months that things are going well.
Right. I was just going to say that. And there are seasons. Hey, if the last year, like we weren't able to contribute in the way we typically did last year, it was a really different year for my family financially. It's okay. Right. Like we're going along. We are all doing the best we can. Exactly. We are spending with our values and our priorities and our personal economy can shift. Right. There could be a year where like you are able to, it is okay. Right. Like you said, like, let's really question this purity element, right? This how it looks thing. And I think that's really there for all of us who, especially who have unearned privilege. And I think we're giving a little bit of a permission slip to untangle that a little bit and that you can help through connection. right? Like maybe I'm not in a place to donate to that cause, but I would love to connect you with, I like doing that. I like connecting people, right? Like, okay, if I'm not able to donate right now, I will connect people to each other, for example, or connect to resources or something like that. And right, that is part of this hate. There are a lot of ways to help. I've actually shared with Angie when I feel like, God, there's so many causes I want to help and be a part of. But like the one that I really could put some time into is changing the Tabor laws in the state of Colorado, the tax laws that have demolished our public school system. And it's through this whole Tabor thing. Anyway, like, gosh, if I were to really get down to it, and it would be, right, that is like the much less sexy, like boring crap that I feel is hurting my community the most. And then that would be the top down thing that I could see being a part of, and that I could really help like my skills, right? And then there could be other causes that someone else is really good at helping. So, I do think it's like, it's okay to pick your cause and really, and do the best you can with that. And that's all right.
And to remember always that one of the things that you can be doing to like contribute to your community is asking for help from someone else and extending that trust and extending that vulnerability. Like that asking someone for help in money, in anything, is an offering of trust and vulnerability to the community. And that is just as valuable when we are trying to long-term build relationships that will actually take better care of everyone.
There's a lovely nonprofit, and I'll link to it in the show notes. They have a program called Offers and Needs. And every quarter, do you know Offers and Needs?
I just love the concept already as you're saying.
You already know it? Yeah. And it's this big Zoom call, and they put you into rooms, and there's a strict framework. You list 3 things you can offer and 3 things that you need. And you do 3 rounds. So it's like, first, it's like obvious. And then you really drill down. Like, because I could also, like, if anyone wants to learn Spanish, right? It's kind of cool. Like, at the last round is the most interesting of like what someone could like really like some funny little thing. And then they make a big spreadsheet and you can follow up with the people. It's so cool. And I think there are people doing some very cool stuff around that and utilizing the internet for what, the best part of it, which is to connect us to people who we wouldn't otherwise be connected to. So it's very
I love
cool.
that. That's so cool.
I was going to say, given this political moment, there's a lot of conversation about what can I do? And I mean, I'm getting a lot of advertising asking me for my money. But I'm also seeing some really cool things coming out of these mutual aid organizations, loose on organization, but like folks were saying, hey, you know what else you could do? You could make art and post it around town, encouraging people to like have faith or keep hope or, resist. So yeah, I would encourage folks too to just look at the multitude of ways that you can show up for community, do it in a way that again reflects the season you're in.
Yeah, highlight someone else's work, right? Connect someone to two people to each other that you think could really benefit. Like, yeah, there's so many ways. Well, River, I have a last question. Of course, I could talk with you forever and ever, and I want to live in a commune with you. Okay, retirement plans. Okay, so a question I like asking members of the club is, if you could picture your money as a creature, real or imagined, what is your first intuitive hit, if you wouldn't mind sharing?
I knew you were going to ask, and it's still hard. Okay, first intuitive, I think it's a puppy. It's a puppy that's just like so excited and so energetic and doesn't know where to put the energy. And so I'm just gently and lovingly, no, over here. Okay, well, you need this. Okay, you need some attention. Okay, over here. All right, it's nap time. Love that.
I love that. And if you were to give that puppy something it needs to feel complete, what's your first intuitive hit of that?
Snuggle.
Close enough. Yeah. That is beautiful. I really feel this nurturing relationship you have with your work, with your money, with your people, with your clients. Do you have any specific offers or anything you would like to share with people about what you're working on right now?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. My favorite thing that I do is my Take Control of Your Money program, which is a 12-week small group program where I teach all the basics of personal finance, but through this kind of anti-capitalist mutual aid focused lens. I run it 3 times a year, and the next time we're going to start is in April of 2025, and then we'll do it again in late summer. So come check that out. And if anybody is interested in the program but doesn't know if it's the right fit for them, I'm happy to do just a free, quick conversation to check if it is actually the right fit for you.
I have loved this conversation and getting to know you better and your work. I will link to all of River's offerings in the show notes. Thank you so much for being on the Money Healing Club podcast.
Thank you
And
so much, Rachel and Angie, for having me. This has been great.
Thanks for listening to the Money Healing Club podcast. You can find resources and links from this episode in the show notes at moneyhealingclub.com/podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, you'd probably really love my free email course on curbing impulse spending with compassion and mindfulness. Check it out at moneyhealingclub.com/challenge. Do you have a question about how financial therapy might help you? Leave me a voicemail at moneyhealingclub.com/podcast, and I might answer your question in a future episode of the pod. We are in this together, and I really appreciate it.